Hello, friends. Dr. David Katz here, COVID reality check. I think we'll call this late pandemic reflections, and I'll try to cover a few highlights for you. But first, in this very difficult time, this very odd year, and good riddance to 2020, let me wish you all very happy holidays in spite of all this. And here's to better days ahead. We will have lived through this indelible passage in history. It's a story that, if we let it, can bind us together. Nothing forges mutual understanding and strength in relationships than weathering common adversity. And if we think of it right, we've done this. We're all going to be telling this story to our grandchildren. We've all been through this. We all lived through the great COVID pandemic. There's been nothing like it in 100 years. Really, if we imbibe it correctly, we truly have all been through this together, and that's meaningful. It makes us alike in a whole new way. We have this in common. So, in the spirit of Christmas and all that good stuff this time of year, let us acknowledge and feel the commonality of all this. Maybe there's a silver lining there. Continue to hope that there is a silver lining also in terms of awareness about health liabilities that have hidden in plain sight all along. Maybe we'll come through this and get more serious about lifestyle as medicine, about improving cardiometabolic health, all that good stuff. So here's to all that, and here's to a very good 2021 for you and your loved ones. So just as I said, a few highlights, late pandemic reflections. If you look at my small library of these videos and my much larger repository of written columns, you'll see people suggest that, I in particular, people who are pretty dug in about, their opinion and perspective, that, I've been wrong. Look how many people have died, and therefore I've been wrong about the pandemic. With all due respect, I disagree, because none of what I suggested influenced national policy, not in the United States, and frankly, nowhere in the world. There are examples of some approximation of total harm minimization by means of vertical interdiction. That's what I advocated at the start. That's what I advocate now. Japan, probably the best, and Japan's done remarkably well. With relatively high transmission rates of the virus and something like herd immunity, but extremely low mortality. And it's not over in Japan yet, but again, they've fared much better than the rest of us. And so if anything, I would say the empirical evidence argues if we're going to go through another pandemic, we need to risk stratify, and we need to think about total harms, the harms of infection, the harms of interdiction, minimize both, all that. So reflecting at this late stage in the pandemic, all that I think is completely right and solid. Obviously, the time it takes for a population of 330 million to decide if, when, and how to expose themselves to the virus was much less predictable than I had hoped, and so it's ongoing. Okay, I think the two key topics of the day are vaccines and the new strain, the mutated strain in the UK. Let me cover those, and let me front load on the topic of the vaccine by encouraging you to read, with an open mind, please, my latest column on the topic. I'll obviously attach the link, and that is entitled COVID Vaccines and the Nature of Engineering. And just to sort of give you the takeaway message, you may think that nature is safer and science is insidiously dangerous, and therefore you want to take your chances with the virus rather than the vaccine. But what I point out is, yes, Mother Nature is a brilliant engineer, best there is, but she's not necessarily working for our side. In other words, Mother Nature designed this virus and designed the virus to elude and defy our immune system. Yeah, she designed our immune system too, and it's incredible, but it's an arms race. And what I compare it to in the column is an impala and a cheetah. Nature's remedy for an impala with an injured leg, even a leg that would get better in due course, is a hungry cheetah. Because Mother Nature doesn't take sides. She's agnostic. She's about balance and equilibria. And so she basically is responsible for both the impala and the cheetah, and she's not necessarily rooting for one or the other. That's our situation here. We're used to being the predator. In the pandemic, we're the prey. And Mother Nature designed the predator. So the idea that I'll just take my chances with the virus, that's the safer course, not necessarily. We don't know the long-term effects of the vaccine. Is it possible there'll be some high level of autoimmune disease 10 years after being vaccinated? It's possible. But let's be clear, we don't know what the late effects of the viral infection are either. We don't have a 10-year experience with SARS-CoV-2. Is it possible that 10 years after infection with SARS-CoV-2 there might be autoimmune disorders or some other consequence we've yet to see? Sure. On the one hand, we've got a virus that was designed by nature and natural selection to elude, defy, and overwhelm our native defenses, and where the responsible engineers have no vested interest in safety. Again, nature didn't design a virus to be safe. She's working for the virus, and essentially what makes the virus circulate makes the virus circulate. The scientists who develop the vaccines are fallible, and the vaccines won't be perfectly safe. We've all heard about some allergic reactions to them, but they're doing everything they can to make them as safe as possible. So if you look at this as two teams of engineers, nature and science, nature is working on behalf of predator as well as prey and has no particular concerns about making the predator safe for the prey. Science is working on behalf of only the prey, i.e. us, and is totally devoted to making the encounter with the vaccine as safe as it could possibly be. No question in my mind, which is the better call for anybody at elevated risk of bad outcomes from COVID, and or anybody at risk of transmitting COVID to somebody in their immediate circle at very high risk of bad outcomes from COVID. The better choice is the vaccine. And I'll get mine. I'm not worried about COVID exposure for me because of my health. My age would put me in a slightly higher risk group. I think my health puts me in a very low risk group. But I love to visit my parents, and they're in a high risk group, so they should get vaccinated. But I don't want to risk transmitting the virus to them before they develop antibodies. So when I have an opportunity to get vaccinated, I will do that. I will film it. I will share it. I haven't had that opportunity yet because I'm not on the front lines now. So I'm not first in line for the vaccine. But the vaccine does not need to be 100% perfectly safe in everybody all the time to be the better choice. Let's be clear. And I hasten to note that trained in internal medicine, I founded and directed an integrative medicine center for 15 years. I worked collaboratively with naturopathic physicians. We were committed to evidence-based, holistic, or integrative medicine, meaning that we carefully shopped for alternatives to conventional medicine when it made sense, either because the conventional options had been tried and failed, or because people had a strong preference for natural treatments, or any one of a number of things. And our mantra, our philosophy, which was shared by the conventionally trained practitioners in the group, such as myself, and the naturopaths, was we don't care if the right remedy comes from a test tube or a tree leaf. Neither nature nor science has a monopoly on good stuff. Nature produced smallpox and science produced the vaccine that eradicated from the world. Nature produces beautiful things and magnificent things and wise things, but is also responsible for botulinum toxin and rattlesnake venom, and on it goes. We can't count on nature to be benevolent. So when we can use kinder, gentler, natural treatments that are effective and the best choice, by all means, let's do. But if the best choice, the safest, most effective, best studied choice comes from a test tube rather than a tree leaf, why should that matter? Let's be beneficiaries of the best that both nature and science have to give. I make the same argument to you now. Don't know what your personal view about vaccines might be, but if you have a reverence for nature, I'm right there with you. If you have concerns that science can get it wrong, I'm right there with you. The best option in a pandemic is not to be in a pandemic. We're in a pandemic. And at this point, and there was just a report out in JAMA, I'll link to that as well, that at this moment in time, this is very temporary, but at this moment in time, SARS-CoV-2 is the leading cause of death in everybody over age 35 in the United States. At this moment in time, the vaccine is clearly the better choice, clearly the lower risk exposure. This vaccine would have to be not just bad, but historically and horrendously bad in terms of toxicity, either vaccine, Pfizer or Moderna, to put it even in the ballpark of the risks of the infection in high-risk people. Now, in low-risk people, different story. If you're perfectly healthy and under age 35, this virus is very unlikely to hurt you. Then the question becomes, do you interact routinely with someone it is likely to hurt? And is it in their best interest, so the best interest of your tribe, as it were, your extended family unit or your nuclear family for that matter, is it in the best interest of your group for you to get vaccinated? It might be. I would encourage individual decision making informed by both personal risk and the risk in your immediate social network. I don't mean this kind of social network. I mean people you literally interact with physically as a matter of routine. Ideally, all of that decision making would be informed by good, consistent, reliable, science and sense-based material from our federal government. I don't know if that's going to happen in time to do you any good. You may be on your own, folks. Sorry about that. It shouldn't be that way, but think of it that way. What is my level of risk as best I can judge, and who do I interact with routinely, and what is their level of risk? And if all of them are vaccinated, maybe I don't need to be. If all of them can't be vaccinated, maybe I should be to help myself and them, and on it goes. As of right now, healthy kids 16 and younger aren't on the list recommended to get the vaccine because, again, this is all a matter of risk trade-off, right? I mean, there isn't a zero risk option in the mix, but kids are so unlikely to be harmed by SARS-CoV-2 that the vaccine would have to be inordinately safe as well as effective in order to do them any good. That equation changes if the kids have any health issues. That equation could conceivably change if you've got a 15-year-old living in a house with a frail octogenarian who doesn't have a good immune response to the vaccine. So there are lots of permutations, but in general, healthy 16 and younger, vaccine is not currently recommended. Healthy 35 and younger, it's not all that likely to benefit you. Extremely healthy 50 and younger, you're still at low risk from the virus. But anything other than relatively young and extremely healthy, your risk associated with the virus goes up, and it isn't long, not long at all, before those risks almost certainly exceed any risks associated with the vaccine. And yes, it's true, we don't know about the long-term effects after exposure to the vaccine, but we don't know about the long-term effects after exposure to SARS-CoV-2 either. And so, again, I've always been an advocate for the public health benefit of vaccines. That's not a new story here. And those of you who think that, maybe didn't it sound like in the beginning Katz was saying, he's not enthusiastic about vaccines? Well, that was true. I wasn't enthusiastic about them being the answer in the pandemic. I didn't want us all hunkering in bunkers until a vaccine because we didn't know when it was coming. And I was warning, we've never seen a vaccine produced this fast, and we have not. And by the way, kudos, these are not just scientists who've done brilliant work, but whole new methods in science, which will stand us well over time. It won't just be this pandemic, but in general, we are going to be able to respond to emerging infectious disease with rapid vaccine development because of newly developed techniques. In terms of the details of the techniques and how the vaccines work and the use of messenger RNA to deliver what I think it was Tom Frieden described as like an email message to your cell about here's what you need to look out for. I think that's a really neat analogy. But effectively, messenger RNA is delivered into the cell. It's coding for the spike protein of SARS-CoV-2. It basically tells the cell, make some of this. The cell makes that. It's an antigenic stimulus. There's an immune system reaction to that spike protein. And then when the spike protein comes along attached to SARS-CoV-2, the immune system is fully prepared to repel it. That's how it works. It's a really elegant approach to vaccination. So again, I never had a lack of enthusiasm for vaccines. I just wasn't expecting them to arrive in time to help us. And by the way, even though they have arrived incredible alacrity, it's still not clear they really have arrived in time because the virus is now so widespread in the United States and much of the world that it may be we're chasing our tails. By the time people get vaccinated, most people will have already been exposed to the virus. It's possible. Okay, so I recommend the vaccine accordingly. Think about risk. Think about risk trade-offs. If you are willing to take the few minutes, please read the column that I'm sharing with you. What about the new strain in the UK? Yes, it's a concern, but it's absolutely inevitable. Essentially, mutations happen all the time. They happen in us too. They're a huge issue in microbial pathogens because they replicate in such short cycles. So, it's as if the human lifespan were some number of minutes and there were new populations replacing, billions and billions different Homo sapiens every few minutes. Any mutation that gave an advantage for survival would quickly come to take over. And we are exactly that same way. And by the way, white skin is a mutation. The native human skin condition is dark or black, and the white skin condition has been mapped as specific genes, and it was associated with the migration north of our kind, where skin pallor was associated with better efficiency at manufacturing vitamin D from sunlight. It's a bit off our current topic, but I'll share a column I wrote about that for Christmas time in particular a few years back in the Huffington Post. I'll attach that one as well. But the mutation rate is a normal thing in all viruses. The numbers involved are vast. And essentially the way this works is if a mutation makes one strain of the virus more effective at transmitting itself and spreading, if it does that better, it will start to take over. That's what's being seen in the UK. I can't tell yet, nobody seems to know yet, whether it's actually better at spreading or if it has some other advantage. It's taking over. We've heard it's 70% better at spreading than the original strain. It's not yet clear that's true based on epidemiologic data that I can access. It's just that it's becoming the predominant strain, which means it's better in some way. Good news here, it is not in the interest of a parasite to kill its host, and certainly not in the interest of a parasite to kill its host quickly. In other words, if the virus mutated in a way that made it more lethal in short order for more of us, it would not become the dominant strain. People would get it, get really sick, and die. If you're really sick, you're going to be isolated and not exposed to other people, and if you die, you stop spreading the virus. That strain will die out with us. It's a bit macabre, but it's the reality. So a highly virulent strain is not reliably favored by natural selection. A highly transmissible strain is. So what often happens is that over time, pathogens become more transmissible because that's the strain that takes over, but less virulent. So I am not concerned that the strain in the UK is likely to be a greater health threat. If anything, I'm hopeful it may be a lesser health threat. And it does still produce the spike protein. It looks like it has a slightly altered version of the spike protein, but all signs indicate that the fundamental structures of the virus are sufficiently intact that the vaccines will work against it. Every expert opinion I've been able to track down is on the same side of this. The vaccine should absolutely be effective against this strain. Testing of that is ongoing as I speak, so they'll be corroborating empirical data, but I'm not concerned about that. So that will suffice for these late pandemic reflections along with the links I'll attach. Boy, we've had a long, tough year, right, in all kinds of ways. And, again, I hope as the year closes out, we both come together because we've had this common experience. But, whatever side of this you're on, this has been really hard, right? I mean, if you think we locked down too little to save many of the 300,000 lives that were lost in the United States, this was really hard on you. If you think we locked down too much and hurted people more with massive unemployment and economic devastation, this has been really hard on you. So, again, we have different perspectives. My perspective, as you know, is in the middle. I think we let far too many people be harmed by the virus that didn't need to be harmed by the virus. I think we augmented that harm with indiscriminate lockdown when we could have done total harm minimization by means of risk stratified interdiction or lockdown policies, not necessarily even involving lockdown per se. And I think we could have saved people on both sides. But the experience we've been through together harmed us from both sides. So, whatever your philosophy, epistemology, perspective, we really are in this together. No one of us got to call the shots and have pandemic response policy be what we wanted it to be. We were all suffering. And maybe there's a commonality there that will make us a little better at listening to one another, recognizing, we've all got baby and we've all got bathwater, and we would all benefit from at least listening to one another carefully before deciding that the opinion we happened already to own is the only thing that's right. That's rarely true. So I'm hopeful of that as we get to the end game. Let me just close by saying we are getting to the end game. Lots and lots and lots of people have now been exposed to the virus, and most of them are immune. And lots of people have yet to be exposed, and the vaccines are available, and we'll get to the high-risk people first. So the toll of the virus will start to dial down, and there is a light at the end of the tunnel, clearly visible at this point. I was completely wrong about the timeline once before. That's a case of fool me once, shame on you. Fool me twice, shame on me. I'm not going to fool myself twice and tell you when this is going to end by a particular date. I don't know. But we are getting there. We're clearly getting there. Absent vaccination, without trying to be on our way to herd immunity, we're on our way to herd immunity. I remind you that in the parts of the country that were hard hit back in the spring, our hospitals are not overwhelmed now. Our hospitals here in Connecticut are not overwhelmed now. Oh, by the way, just a reminder too, all of the news you're getting about the pandemic, whether you're getting it, with a left-leaning perspective or a right-leaning perspective, doesn't matter. It's all coming to you wrapped in drama. So I just before this recording, I gave a talk to public health colleagues in Qatar, in the United Arab Emirates. And, was talking about all the drama and reminding people, remember when we heard that people were dying of stroke associated with COVID, and it was another one of those the sky is falling announcements? Have you heard anywhere from anybody that people are no longer dying of stroke because everybody now routinely gets treated with anticoagulants and those blood clots are not happening? No, because telling you, oh God, there's another complication, is a wonderful opportunity for drama. Telling you that problem's been fixed is not an opportunity for drama. So I mean, really, the reporting on this, I think, has been fairly irresponsible in both directions, favoring hype and drama to the extremes of polar opinion over a balanced, centrist accounting for what's going on. And another issue there is that hospitals always fill up in the fall and winter, always. Respiratory illness is always common this time of year. So if it's not COVID, it would be other things. Now, is COVID worse than it would be? Sure. But some portion of hospitals being full, some portions of ICUs being stressed, is just business as usual in the winter in America. Happens every year. Are you being told that? No, you're not being told that. So, again, there's a lot of truth in the mix about, this pandemic being bad. There is still a lot of drama, a lot of distortion. When you do the best you can, and you need a machete, frankly, to cut through all the tangles of dogma, diatribe, drama, and hype that populate the infodemic, you see that we are more by happenstance than design, well on our way to herd immunity. The vaccines are going to accelerate that. There is a light at the end of the tunnel. I can see it, not that far away. It is not an oncoming train. Better days ahead. So once again, my friends, happy holidays to you and your loved ones. Stay safe and keep the faith. This too shall pass.